Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to episode number 5 of the MEDviews series here on SalMED. And today we have a very special guest, a guest who is not pre-med, who is not a medical student, who is not a resident, who is not a physician, who has nothing to do with the field of healthcare. And this guest is Emily Hansen, who is a fourth-year student at the University of Notre Dame and a future consultant at the prestigious McKinsey and Co. Now, before I get into her bio, the reason I'm bringing her onto the channel is she brings a perspective that is very different, and a perspective that I ran into many times. And this is for the people who go into college thinking that they want to pursue a field in medicine or healthcare, and they realize getting into their sophomore, junior, and senior year of college that they don't want to pursue that field anymore. This video is for you, for the students that panic and worry because they think, what am I going to do with a STEM major? So we're going to get into that, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode. So as always, just a quick rundown of our speaker today. Emily Hansen is a senior at the University of Notre Dame, where she will graduate this spring with a double major in biology and political science with a minor in business. Her past experiences have included undergraduate research focused on mosquito control and a public health policy researcher at a think tank in the UK, and most recently interning at GE Healthcare in the Commercial Leadership Program. Her time at GE was focused on designing, marketing, and analyzing a digital product for the virtual ICU space. After graduation, Emily will return to Cleveland to work in McKinsey and Company as a business analyst. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and hop right into the interview. Hey Emily, thanks for being on the channel today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Is there anything in your bio that I mentioned that you would like to emphasize, or something that I might have missed?
No, it all sounds good to me, and I think you hit everything.
Great. So typically, the first question that I always ask is, why did you choose the field of medicine? But since this is a very unorthodox interview, we're going to hop into the first question being, why did you choose to major in biology and poli-sci and do a minor in business?
Yeah, so actually kind of the biology portion of it, I entered Notre Dame, which I can talk about later, with an interest of being pre-med. I always had an interest in the sciences when I was in high school. I was particularly interested in infectious disease and infectious disease research, and just how the majors shake out at Notre Dame. It made the most sense for me to be a biology major because it would be touched upon within that major. So bio for me was a no-brainer going into ND. And of course, I had in the back of my mind that option of being pre-med if I wanted to. Political science was something that I actually declared with biology from the beginning. I always had an interest in kind of social issues and change. And for me, political science appealed to me for that reason, to keep me active in what's going around nationally and internationally. And also for me, it's very interesting to kind of track like interactions between people, their interests, and kind of the institutions that make up America and make up the world. So that was something I declared from the beginning. My minor in business was ultimately kind of something that was inspired by both my biology and political science background. I kind of found that I was really interested in issues such as climate change and healthcare, which of course had an intersection between the sciences and policy. And for me, I felt like to have a more complete approach to these issues, that it would make sense for me to kind of have a business or finance background. Finances, consumer habits, and economics are deeply intertwined with these sort of issues. And I just thought I could be more impactful if I were to pursue a career in any of those fields, if I had a foundation in business economics.
So was there ever a point in time, like going into ND or maybe in the middle of your undergraduate experience, that did you ever think that you wanted to go to medical school or any healthcare profession? And if so, or if not, then what made you change your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, I came into Notre Dame wanting to be pre-med. Again, I was really interested in infectious disease, both bedside and research. And I was always interested in medicine and the healthcare field. I changed my mind around the end of freshman year. I already kind of struggled with, Gen Chem and Orgo and all of those kind of tough prerequisites they throw at you. And I realized that while I deeply cared about the field of medicine and healthcare, that I don't really think bedside would be right for me. So it was kind of one of those things where it's like, if I'm not 100% sure, I probably shouldn't commit to such, rigorous schooling in the future. If if I'm don't really want to be bedside. And I kind of realized that I was able to touch upon the healthcare field in different ways. I can talk about it later, but my interest in policy and healthcare policy, as well as some business components that interact with the field of medicine, such as med tech, the different technologies, the different business contracts that companies have to provide this care for consumers and patients, was really interesting to me. So rather than abandoning the field of medicine and healthcare altogether, as well as my biology major, I stuck with it because I thought it would really be a great asset for me as I entered the field kind of in a different way. So from there, I was really kind of determined to find a different career path for me to keep being engaged in my biology major, but trying to approach it in a more business or policy standpoint rather than, bedside medicine.
Right. So pretty much the point of why I brought you on this channel was to talk about like how there are other ways that you can make an impact in both in the field of healthcare, but like also in biology without going into the field of medicine. So it's great to see that different perspective. So you did some research with a think tank in the UK, as well as research with mosquito control during your time at Notre Dame. So could you just expand on those experiences that you had?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with my experience at Notre Dame. So I did research freshman through junior year at Notre Dame, just, an undergraduate researcher. I was in a lab with Dr. Shea that focuses on mosquito control and specifically controlling mosquitoes in Belize in order to decrease the spread of, diseases such as dengue and Zika. So my research was focused mainly on insecticide resistance. Again, to control those mosquitoes that carry those certain diseases. And the goal of my work was to guide the Ministry of Health in Belize. So a little portion of the WHO organization to improve their policy and the effectiveness of the insecticides that they use. So it was a lot of learning how to work with live organisms. I breeded the mosquitoes myself. I raised them and was harvesting the mosquitoes throughout. So that was a really unique experience that I had while I did pick up a lot of bug bites along the way. It was a really cool thing to be able to work with live organisms. And as well as that, I was able to kind of interact with more of the policy side, seeing how firsthand research and effective research and the way you convey it and communicate it to organizations such as the Ministry of Health and WHO can really have an impact on policy and the decisions they make in certain areas. So it was really interesting to kind of see both sides, again, being able to use the policy side as well as those hard research skills that you need to be in a lab. So that was my main focus of my research at Notre Dame with the mosquitoes. Moving on to my second experience, while I was abroad in London, I was able to take a semester abroad in London in the fall of 2019. I had the opportunity to intern at a think tank. It was like a nonpartisan think tank in the UK that was based, in essentially downtown London. So my work included two projects. The first one was creating policy recommendations to improve the health safety executive. So kind of like the equivalent of, the CDC or WHO, but for the UK. It's kind of their national health organization on their asbestos air monitoring standards. And then the second portion of my project there was performing, I guess, what you would call a gap analysis of existing frameworks of different cross-cultural communication. So, different psychological and theories that people use to kind of bridge gaps between different nations. So that was work that was done directly with the British Council. For the first project that I did with asbestos air monitoring, again, that was a really great intersection of where you can use your science background with policy in order to enact change. And this is something that, they never had a biology intern before. They kind of took, a leap of faith with me, but it was something where you can really excel in using some of your hard science knowledge. A lot of this stuff included, having a physics background or having, those types of understandings on, what are the air monitoring standards they use? How do you record like molecule sizes? How is this, compared to other countries? So being able to understand some of the kind of tricky language that people use when describing, more technical science aspects was actually really helpful for the project. And in addition, since asbestos has so many implications on people's health, there was definitely a health component that was tied deeply with that project as you're talking about things such as, lung cancer, breathing issues, the deterioration of lung tissues due to asbestos in people's homes and in schools. So it was really interesting to be able to bring a more sciencey background to a team that didn't at all have a science background. Most of the people I worked with were, philosophy majors and, English majors, because that is kind of what think tanks attract. So it was really nice to be able to bounce ideas off of people that had a completely different background from me. And then as far as the second project that I did, definitely less sciencey, but still great to kind of jump into, outside of my comfort zone on something a bit more nitty gritty and I guess abstract, like political sciencey. But it was really nice to be able to learn what is the best way and the more effective ways to interact with people from different cultures and from different nations.
So, being someone coming from a research background, more of the scientific research, compared to you coming from policy, what is something that you learned while doing policy research specifically?
Yeah. So with policy research specifically, something that I've learned is to not get as trapped in the details like you would with, hard science research. With science, you're really looking at a very regimented procedure. You want to follow things to the T. And in policy research, you can be more, I guess, loosey-goosey with the way you go about things. A lot of it is communicating with your teammates, trying to bridge gaps of understanding, whether that be between different cultures, different nations, things like that. And it is a lot more reading and I guess less hands-on. But what I found was a lot of the information can be kind of gathered and understood by using like the scientific method. I mean, just like normal science research, you have your hypotheses, you kind of look at where you should gather information, you make observations, and then you whittle things down. And it's similar to science research, but of course, some of the ideas are much more abstract.
So, it seems like the big elephant in the room here seems like you're going to be working with McKinsey and Company starting this summer, which, first off, congratulations again. What are some things that you did to really stand out as a person applying to such a prestigious company like McKinsey?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm still kind of shocked that it ended up working out like that. But I guess it's three main things that I can think of. The first is to research. You want to research both the company fit, while McKinsey is I guess, a prestigious company or whatnot. Different companies in consulting and, different companies in every field have a certain, atmosphere, culture, the people you can expect might have different personalities. So you really want to understand what you're expecting from this company, how you would fit in this company, both, culturally and professionally. So that would be my first, word of advice is to research not only the company, but then again, to research also people that have similar interests to you or a background as you. One of the big things that really benefited me throughout the recruiting experience, since I did kind of go into business a bit later than some of my, classmates who are in the undergraduate business school at Notre Dame, was to really identify and reach out to people that have similarities. So for me, that was one, being a woman in business, and two, being a woman in STEM that was entering into a more business oriented career. So it was really easy then for me to, pick out some people that I've heard either speak at recruiting events or, that I've come across on LinkedIn and connect with them because we already had, grounds to connect with. So that's kind of my first point, is to really take the time, research the company and research the people within the company who can maybe help you out or explain, how they got to the position they were in, especially if they had a similar background as you. The second thing I would say is to market yourself wisely. I feel like it's very difficult for science majors who had an idea of maybe, always being pre-med, always being a doctor, to then take a step back and realize there's so many opportunities besides being bedside medicine that are out there for you. So I would really encourage people to not box yourself in. That's what I really tried to do on my resume, was emphasize the things that not only that I did, in a more hard science way, but the way I bridge gaps to maybe different fields. And again, that kind of goes back from taking skills that you've learned from, whether it be research or even like your lab classes and things like that, and kind of pull back the lens and think about what are some transferable skills that I have from that. I think a lot of times science majors will realize that they have wonderful problem solving skills. They have very good critical thinking. They're quick on their feet. They're analytical. And these are all things that, competitive employers are looking for. So it's really important to just really market yourself wisely. Don't box yourself in too much about being so hardcore science, because you can take those skills and transfer them elsewhere. My last point would be to be prepared. I think it's really important to know what you're going into when it comes to the recruiting process. That's both being said, consulting obviously has a very interesting way of interviewing with a case study, and also then, a normal behavioral interview. So just be prepared. I would say run through what you're going to say, articulate it as clearly and concisely as possible, and don't be afraid to put time on, your friends' calendars and other even future employers' calendars to take the time to really practice and think out loud, because it is one of those things where practice does make perfect, and it helps a lot if you have at least a couple, an hour or two under your belt of what to expect and how to articulate what you're trying to say.
So, going to the University of Notre Dame, what is one thing that you liked, or how did you like your overall experience at the University of Notre Dame?
Yeah, well, I'm biased, but I absolutely
Yeah.
loved Notre Dame. Even though, the recent football game against Alabama might not show it. It was a really fun, almost 4 years at this point. But I really loved that Notre Dame focuses a lot about community, both, the Notre Dame community and then the South Bend community outside. So there's a lot of opportunities to get involved with the dorms, to get involved, with extracurricular sports, with intramurals, and then also volunteering off campus. So that's something that really drew me to Notre Dame, which I think they did a very good job instilling in the students. The second thing that I really enjoyed about my experience throughout at ND was just the drive that a lot of the students had, especially being in the biology major. I was blessed enough to be surrounded by a lot of pre-med students. So it was a lot of people, wanting to be collaborative, wanting to push each other to do their best, always wanting to have study groups, to compare answers, to work together on projects. So that was a really nice atmosphere to have. And then I guess the last big thing that I love about Notre Dame was the opportunities that it gave me. I was able to reach out to some great alum, also, catch the eye of some companies that maybe I might not have otherwise. But overall, I think they prepared me pretty well, and they allowed me to, have two majors and a minor and still graduate on time. So, I mean, I think that's a big bonus for me.
So, what does a typical day look like for you at the University of Notre Dame pre-COVID times?
Yeah, pre-COVID. I mean, hard to remember what pre-COVID was, but
Yeah.
I guess pre-COVID, I would normally just, wake up, go to class probably around 9:30, 10. I would have class probably up until, I tried to schedule it out so I wasn't in class too long. But I mean, with labs, especially, sometimes those were a large block of time. But, I'd hopefully be wrapped up by class by 3 or 4. And then for me, it was really important for me to be able to work out, to really, train my body, and also, work other aspects of my time at Notre Dame. And fitness was something that I really enjoyed being a part of, the fitness community. So I would usually work out. And then I also worked on campus as a rec sports employee. So I was involved with intramural sports, whether that be officiating, which I did for a little bit, or just supervising. So that was a really fun atmosphere to me. So hopefully by then I usually wrap up from working out and working and dinner, and hopefully I leave at least a bit of my evening to hang out with my friends or just relax. So uh, yeah, that's mostly what my day looked like. It was more fun, of course, on the weekends when we had a big football game. But pre-COVID, I tried to keep my schedule pretty relaxed and leave myself, good blocks of time in order to study if I had big things coming up.
So, As a bio major and not going into the healthcare profession, what other job options were you considering and looking at?
Mhm. Yeah, so I actually had another offer at a finance position. So I was actually looking in finance positions as well, weirdly enough. And the reason for that was I was really drawn to some of the analytical work that I did as a biology major. Additionally, I was able to work at a larger company in kind of a sales role, and I found myself drawn to more of the number crunching. So I figured, finance would be a great way for me. I don't mind the numbers. I have an interest in business. And it just seemed like a good fit for me because I was able to do work finance within a big healthcare company, which was important for me. It was always important for me to be able to work either in or among the backdrop of a healthcare company or med tech, anything like that. So I actually looked at some finance roles. For me, something that stood out to me were rotational programs. So programs where maybe you'll be, sign a contract for 2 years, but you'll technically be rotating, through 4 positions. So like every 6 months or something like that. Because I didn't have, that traditional business background, I really wanted to be able to learn as much as I could within the 2 years. So things such as consulting, where they really dunk you into many different projects over your time there, or rotational programs really appealed to me. Um, Another avenue that I looked at and had some offers in was sales. So I think you see that a lot with engineers as well, another STEM major, but engineers and then also STEM majors that might not necessarily be pre-med tend to, fall a bit more towards sales because they have that technical background. So I was involved in, it was kind of like med tech sales, and it was really nice actually to see a lot of STEM majors drawn to that field. It just really helped, and I think talking to a lot of people within some of the companies I recruited with, those who had a STEM background felt like they had a foot up because the jargon, I guess the jargon, some of the technical terms that are involved in those types of sales, those types of understanding the product and then conveying it to the consumer, it was a lot easier for them to grasp than some who didn't have that background. So those are definitely some avenues that I would encourage people to consider. Just because you have a bio background, like I mentioned before, you have a lot of transferable skills that any company and employer would be happy to have, regardless what the position is. So it's just really in terms of knowing how to articulate that and knowing exactly what to express and how you can maybe take a skill from a lab or research and take it to a different field.
So, lastly, is there any advice that you would give to people who change their mind from being pre-med and pursuing something else, and maybe they don't want to change their biology major, or they're worried because they've reached their junior year or senior year of college and they realize, like, I don't want to go into medicine or nursing or whatever it may be? What advice would you have to those people who want to pursue biology and are looking at those other job options?
Right. So I think the first piece of advice that I would have for other students kind of changing their path, either early or late in their STEM career, would be not to panic. I definitely panicked at first when I realized, I'm no longer pre med. Like, what do I do with my life? One of the weirdest feelings was it's super liberating deciding not to be pre med because, that's a huge grind for the rest of your life. But at the same time, it's also, you now have 8 to 10 years that you're planning on spending at medical school, residency, specialization that are no longer accounted for. So it is kind of a panicky feeling thinking about, okay, now what do I do? But I would definitely say don't panic. There are a lot of people who are in the similar situation, and whatever school you're at, there are resources available for having these sorts of switches, whether it be with your career counseling center at your university or school, or with friends that or also, even online. So that'd be my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice would be to do your research. There are a lot of companies that are STEM background, founded by STEM people that have a focus in medicine or healthcare or med tech. The medical field is humongous, and there's a lot of companies that will fill lots of niches within that field. So I would just consider, spending some time each day looking up companies similar to how you would like search for colleges. Where do you find yourself fitting? A lot of times you can narrow it down by geography, by location, and looking at companies and the positions they offer. A lot of times the positions might seem like they're closed off to STEM majors since, it might be labeled as a finance role or an econ role or whatever you want to label it as. But a lot of times those positions are open to any sort of major. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of transferable skills that STEM majors have that can be used in any field. And as long as you market yourself well, an employer will recognize that. So that's my second piece of advice: to do your research on the companies, positions that are out there and that you might be interested in. My third piece of advice would be to find others who have branched out as well. So, I can serve as a resource, and there are many other people who have done that path and have done a kind of a more untraditional path with a STEM major. It's very helpful to just kind of hear, what are the choices they made, what options that they had, and, what kind of led them to the position they're in now. For me, that was the process of putting time on people's calendars, reaching out via email, via LinkedIn, and just saying, hey, like, I've decided not to be pre-med. I would still like to be, remain a bio major for whatever reason, whether it be, for me, I just love biology. I wanted to be involved. But for other people, I'm already too many credits in. Like, I can't really afford to pull out now. So a lot of other people have branched out because, being pre-med is difficult, and it's not something you want to go into without being 100% sure. And I would really say, like, there are probably many other people that weren't 100% sure and still have landed in very lucrative and jobs that they're passionate about. And for me, it was very important to stay and remain in the realm of STEM and medicine and healthcare. And there are a lot of positions out there that will give you that opportunity, whether it's the company itself is a big healthcare company or conglomerate, or if they just offer a lot of projects or have a division of their company that can focus in on that as well. And I think that's actually extremely helpful to be reaching out to people who are in those specific branches, because you can relate to them on a level that a lot of other applicants and people can't. So that would be my 3 pieces of advice. Don't panic, do your research, and then find others that have branched out, because there's a huge wide net of support out there if you do choose to not be pre-med.
Great. Thanks again, Emily, for your time. I think this will be a great resource for people who, again, go into college as pre-med and they're set on that, and then they might not do as well in their courses, and they start to panic because they think, oh, like, I've gotten so far. What can I do now? Can I change my major and all this stuff? So it's good that, with you having this, input, they'll have at least some sort of resource to refer to, that there are many other options as a STEM major that you can go into besides the field of healthcare. So thanks again for your time, and we'll stay in touch, and make sure to check out my other videos.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, have a good day.
You too.